Hey, everybody, this is Mike Weaver, pastor at St. Luke, and this is the Faith and Life podcast. Welcome. We're so glad you're with us. And as always, with the Faith and Life podcast is Greg.
Hey, Osborne. I,
Sorry,
do
just
you, I didn't know if you were going to finish that. Greg,
Greg
Greg
Osborne.
Osborne, the student pastor at St. Luke.
Yep. And with us today is a special guest. We're so happy that Pastor Tim Iseringhausen is with us. Round of applause for Rode. It's awesome.
I'll insert the clap track here after in
Yeah,
post edit.
I obviously didn't pay you guys enough.
I was hoping Mike would hype it up a little bit more of the
Well,
inter.
Yeah,
Ladies
yeah,
and
no, that's
gentlemen,
all
like the
right.
Chicago Bulls announcer, please
Yeah,
welcome.
when there's nothing there to hype, it's kind of hard.
Yeah. And so Tim was with us on Sunday, and he was the pastor at St. Luke in the 90s, 1990s, from
Right,
1991
yeah,
to 99. Is that right?
yeah, yep. The end of '99 up to through Christmas of '99. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. So we'll talk more about that and talk more about his life, and we're grateful that we can do that. But before we get there, we've got a question. Actually, Greg, I forgot. Do you have a question? I have a question that tells you have a
You
question.
say like we have a question. I
We have a
didn't have one.
question.
I thought you had one.
I do have one. I do have one. So here's the question. It was on our board above our coffee. Um, and the question is, I'm trying to think between the two questions. There's one this week and one last week. Um, I'm going to go with the one 2 weeks ago. What's the worst thing you've ever eaten? What's the
The
worst
worst.
thing? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's easy. That's
Yeah.
easy. So when I was in seminary, my internship was up in Minnesota. And so my wife, Sharon, who was 7 months pregnant with our first daughter, and we packed a U-Haul and put it on the back end of our 1970 Olds Cutlass Supreme, which I wish I still had now. But yeah, anyway, we got up to Minnesota, and the first thing that they did was they had a opening dinner for us. Welcome to Minnesota dinner. And we walked into the church basement, and there was just this awful, awful smell. I mean, it was roadkill. It was, whatever, And I thought, oh my land, what is it they're going to make us eat? And here they were fixing the Minnesota delicacy lutefisk.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, which is cod that's soaked in lime or lye or whatever that stuff is. And it'll kill you if they don't clean it all off. And it's a delicacy for those Norwegians. But I tell you, they put a plop of it on my plate, and it looked like clear cellulite. I mean, it
Yeah.
shook like jello, that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. And I don't even remember what they gave with it, what the side dish was. But I looked at that and I thought, are we supposed to eat this? It was just, and of course they give you loads of butter and everything else. Anytime they give you lots of butter or stuff, they're trying to hide something. And it was absolutely the worst thing I've ever tasted. Now, what do you say to people you've never met before who are,
Right.
obviously going to a lot of trouble to, bring everybody together and to fix this meal?
Yep.
And I thought I'd be funny, so I said, "Gee, if I'd known you were serving this, I would have brought my German bratwurst," which the whole place went silent, just silent. And I thought, oh, this is a great way to start off at my year in internship. And my wife Sharon leaned over and said, "Well, you can go through anything for a year. You can handle
Oh,
anything for a
man.
year." All of a sudden that year look, but I mean, bless their heart, they were wonderful people, just beautiful people. And they, after that moment of silence, they started laughing and, or I have to call the seminary and tell them never to send us another German, and they just rolled with it. And And my very last Sunday there on internship, they were mentioning to me, you remember a year ago when you came? I said, yeah, I haven't recovered since. It was just, so
Yeah,
that had to be the worst thing I've ever eaten in my life. But the context is kind of fun along with it. So
absolutely. Tim, I actually literally was going to say the same thing,
were
lutefisk.
you really?
Yes, because that is I agree with you. Everything you just how you described it, it's fish soaked in something that's nothing should be soaked in lye. I mean,
Oh no.
soak it in lye. It should not be soaked in it.
No. Yeah, I
No,
mean, lies should be, I mean, that's
no, it's no
no.
good.
That's
Yeah,
just what could go wrong? What
right.
could go wrong?
And this
Yes,
is why I never
exactly.
went to seminary in Minnesota. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, because it was like, I think it was a holiday. It was like during Advent. The church I was
Yeah.
at in St. Paul did an Advent like lutefisk dinner.
Oh,
But I got invited to my seminary, or excuse me, my supervisor, internship supervisor, me, and a couple other people from staff to this lady's house. And she made
oh,
lutefisk for
oh.
us. So now I'm at somebody's house
Yeah. What do
and
you
she had a
do?
plate. It was rutabagas, and the
Oh,
rutabagas were delicious.
yeah.
But
But the
you're right.
combo.
That gelatinous thing of fish, I think I took a bite or two and I'm like, I can't do it. I mean, I'll eat anything once, but
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
just couldn't do, Tim. I mean, I'm with you on
Yeah.
that. Yeah, so funny you brought that up because I'm like, that was mine too.
Yeah. No,
Um,
it was very humbling experience because I've always prided myself on the ability to eat anything,
yeah,
like a human garbage can. But I discovered my limit.
And that's
yeah,
The
your
line in
circle
the
by
sand is
Ludafish.
lutefisk.
yeah. It's but then in Minnesota, I don't know if they still do, in the 90s at least, when I was there, you could buy frozen lutefisk in the freezer section of the supermarket. I'm like, who's going to buy that? I don't know why.
Oh,
I don't know. I
that's
don't get
just
it.
wrong.
It's just wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I can
Anyway,
really
Greg.
I don't think I can top that. So I'll just say when I was in Scotland at one point, I had a piece of fish and it wasn't lutefish, but it was just it had the entire like head and eyes looking at me and I couldn't do that. Like I know that it existed as a fish and I know what a fish looks like and what it should, but seeing it
Yeah.
look at me in my soul as I was eating, I was just
Yeah.
like, no, I can't do it.
Yeah. 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 No, yeah, I agree with you on that too. If the food looks back at you, that's kind of
It's not
sends it
good.
to a new level of creepiness.
Yep. When I was in Minnesota, we had I was at somebody's house for a Christmas gathering, and they had pickled herring. And you put it on the crackers, a little
Uh,
bit of pickled herring on crackers,
yeah.
and I'd never had it. It was delicious. I'm like, this is
Oh,
really
yeah.
good. Right, just
I
a little
love
bit
pickle
on a
herring.
cracker, so good.
My dad always had pickle herring, and I would look at him, and when I was little, I mean, and
Yeah,
it's that onion and that just,
yeah,
and he said, "You want to try one? And I'll put it on a cracker for you. That'll take some of the bite away from it. Put it on a cracker." And I've been hooked since. I can sit
yeah.
down and eat a whole jar of that in one sitting.
Oh yeah, so, yeah.
Ah, it's great.
So then I was in Germany for the first time in like around year 2000. The church I was at, we had a sister church in northern Germany, and no, it was 2001. So anyway, I go there and we go to this restaurant up on the Baltic Sea, north with there,
Oh,
north
yeah.
side of Germany, and we're in the restaurant and it had herring on it. I'm like, oh, and it was like pickled herring. I'm like, oh, I love pickled herring. This is really good. There's a whole big thing of like a whole fish pickled. I'm like, I don't want the whole thing. I just want a couple
Wow.
bites. I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking. I'm like, I can't
Can you
eat
get a
this
big
whole.
cracker to put this on?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm like, I just can't eat the whole thing.
We
It's
got a
so
big
hot.
saltine cracker over here. That's it becomes dangerously close to a pizza. Then
Right?
throw a little tomato sauce on it, and
Yeah.
That's right.
you got an anchovy
Yeah.
pizza.
Yep.
Oh
Oh
man,
man.
a pickled
So
fish. That's great.
yep. So Tim, Sunday you preached, and I gotta say that was really outstanding. And there are a couple
Oh,
highlights for me. And it did what sermons are meant to do. That is, it creates a conversation within us, and it like pull while we don't always verbalize back to the preacher, there's
mhm.
something that we kind of not wrestle, but
Yeah.
maybe sometimes wrestling, but we start thinking. And when you were talking about the pahs, and by the way, if anybody's not listened to it or watched it, you can go back and you can see it on our YouTube channel. Um, but I thought, yeah, I was like, amen, amen, amen. And there's the whole idea of this, that God's faithfulness is this all throughout, this from Genesis to Revelation to this very day, this underneath constant baseline of God's faithfulness that sustains it. And it's always right on time. The timing's perfect for God's faithfulness all the time. It just all that was ringing in my head as you were preaching as well. So it was really,
Well,
really great.
I'm glad it was meaningful.
Yeah.
That's always my prayer, and your prayer too, and Greg's, and that what we do as servants of the Lord makes a difference in people's lives and gets people to think and urges them on to growth
Yep.
and
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
So
So tell us
yeah.
about your time here at St. Luke. You started here in 91. Well, no, did you start here at 91 or started
No, I started in
here?
'93 actually. Yeah,
93.
the I believe the anniversary is '91 for the congregation, and
Yeah.
St. Luke was formed from two previous congregations, and that were on their own, both struggling a little bit. Divinity Lutheran was the name of one, and I'm sorry I don't recall the other. But after a couple of years, it really hadn't hadn't taken off. So the synod uh, categorized or reclassified the congregation as a mission redevelopment. So it's not a mission from scratch, it's not a new start, but it's a redevelopment. And the importance of that is that it opens the congregation up to resources that might not be available or at least are more easily accessible as a mission redevelopment congregation. And so I had to go through some training as a mission redeveloper. And then I was called from a congregation. I was an associate pastor up in Toledo and was called then to serve as the pastor in '93. I got there and got to St. Luke in June of '93, I believe. And, just redevelop. And at that point in time, the congregation had been bequeathed, again, one of the benefits of mission redevelopment, the property there on Morse Road,
Mm.
where we are now. Before we had been over on McCutcheon Road, right where the Giant Eagle is now, grocery complex and whatnot, right across from the fire station.
Yeah.
And uh, so, anyway, we got that property and uh, began the building process of putting up the first facility, which would be what we have now, minus the worship center.
Mhm.
So the worship center was a primary addition, which came Pastor Steve Brown, who followed me. Pastor Steve did that then a couple of years after I had left. But we were in that first unit, they called it, for my 6 years there, 6 years there.
Mm.
And yeah, it was quite the adventure as we were there. I think one of the stories that comes out in your history in the St. Luke history that was written by Steve Howard a couple years ago.
Yeah.
We had a moment of crisis when it came to finances, and it was uh, Becky Tyson was the treasurer at that point in time, and she came up to me and she said, "Well, Pastor Tim, do we pay utilities or do we pay you?" And I said, "Well, of course you pay me, you know." And then I kind of laughed and chuckled. I said, well, "We need to pray on this a little bit." And that next week, and we I think we owe the utilities something like 4,900 and change. And that next week, we got a check in the mail for $5,000 from the estate of a lady who I had never heard of. And I asked our secretary and Carol Madel at that point in time, and she didn't know this person. And I asked around, and it was on legal paper from the attorney who said this is the estate, and I said, well, I thought, well, should I call the attorney and just double check to make sure they got the right St. Luke, or should I just let it slide?
Yeah. Yeah.
Quick, cash the check. But I called the attorney, and he said, no, nobody in the family is aware of your congregation. And it just out of the blue, before she passed, she put this addendum in her estate that said $5,000 to St. Luke Lutheran Church in Columbus, Ohio.
Wow.
And here I am holding a check that's, like maybe $50 more than what we owed. And I handed it to Becky. And that became for us, a real, uh, a real moment
Mhm.
of word from the God that we are from God, that we are doing what we need to be doing, that we are here, that He wants us here.
Mm.
And not that we didn't know that before, but there's always, when you struggle, Lord, what are you trying to tell us? What
Yep.
is this all about? And in that moment, it was our Ebenezer.
Yep. Yep.
And it was our memorial, it was our monument. And from that moment, things really took off for us in terms of growth. Although we'd been growing before that too, but it was just and sharing that with the people. And I remember sharing that in the sermon that next week, and people were just amazed, and it just lifted it up and lifted us up and galvanized us.
Yeah, that's
I
so good.
Yeah, mission and ministry, and that was as I look back on St. Luke. There are those little fun little things that happen, and the people relationships and whatnot. But in terms of the ministry, when I think of St. Luke in my 6 years there, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
It's God breaking into our anxieties and worries and all that kind of stuff, and saying, I'm here. I'm your rock.
Yeah.
You lean on me, hang on, and we've got a great adventure going. And so when I was called away from St. Luke, my prayer was, Lord, I'm referring back to our Ebenezer here, Lord. You've got us here, and not just for my short time here, but for what happens in the future. And I've told a number of people in the congregation, already that I've been so excited and thrilled to see what's happened at St. Luke since I left. Not, and I'm not talking just about numeric growth. I'm talking about spiritual presence and being God's hands and feet on the ground, and just being a light on the hill,
Yeah. That's
a light
awesome.
on
What
the
a
hill there in
Yeah.
Columbus and
Yeah.
whatnot. And I remember too when I was in being interviewed. Um, one of the folks said, what will you do to make us another Peace Lutheran Church? Because they were thinking big and huge. And, I said, well, what makes you think God's calling us to be another Peace Lutheran Church? I
Hmm.
don't think He's calling us to be that. He's calling us to be something different,
Mm.
whatever different looks like,
Yeah.
and so understanding, because we're not that far away
Right.
from, and there was some debate about whether, we sell that property on Morse Road and move out to New Albany,
Mm.
a little bit of elbow room or whatnot. But after lots of prayer, I thought, no, we need to be here. There's something about us being here that's very important. Uh, and
Wow.
so my prayer as I left was that would continue to flourish, and it certainly has under Steve's leadership and your leadership and Greg's and so many other people who've been faithful servants. And so I just give thanks every day for that. and giving us a place to retire to.
Yeah, yeah. And it's been a thrill to have you with us, just you and Sharon, and I've just been so grateful that the two of you are with us and how you've been yeah, it's been awesome. Just been really,
Well,
really,
thanks.
yeah, yeah,
Well, thanks for welcoming us because,
yeah,
yeah, that doesn't happen all that often that way where a previous pastor comes back and settles in, although it's been a while, but still,
yeah,
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 I appreciate your
yeah.
welcoming us.
And it's so interesting how I literally, we didn't plan the conversation, but my comment about your sermon on God's faithfulness is always on time. And like your story is precisely that, like
Yeah,
of God, that check coming or at just the right time.
Yeah.
And that God
right.
being that rock and saying, like, I got you, it's gonna be okay. You guys are just keep going the direction you're going. I'm providing for you. And
Yeah,
what a
yeah,
beautiful
Well,
testimony and all that as it goes forward too.
what I
Greg?
like about that too, Mike, is it's in the moment, in the midst of that struggle right there, like, the gut wrench, reaction is, well, no, sure, yeah, let's pay the utilities. But like you also have a family to provide for and things like this. And so
yeah,
your reaction is rather than me make a decision, let's go to it in prayer. And like to have that then as such a good reminder for us of I'm so wired in my life to sometimes be like, I got this, I can figure this out. But sometimes I just need a pause and say, you know what? Hey, let's pray about this and let
Mhm.
God do what God does.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we tend to put God in a box in our individual lives of faith too.
Yeah.
Oh, God's not concerned about this, or God doesn't care about this. He's got bigger fish to fry. It's just me. And if Scripture tells us anything, it's He's certainly concerned about the larger picture, the community, but He's also just as concerned with our individual needs and worries and wants and desires. I mean, when Scripture tells us He knows the numbers of the hairs on our head, I mean, you can't get a whole lot more invested than something like that. So
Right.
God is invested in each one of us, and He cares about that. And so to go to Him and be humbled by the fact that the God of all creation, I mean, just think of it. Think of the things that this James Webb telescope are seeing and visualizing and all that kind of thing. Um, and the God of the universe who created all that loves you and me. Greg, if you were the only person on this planet who had ever sinned,
You
the
still
only imperfect, he still would have gone to the cross.
love it.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
and to me, that's just, I mean, that is so humbling, and I mean, if you understand that, there's no way you can feel unloved or abandoned or whatever, no matter what happens.
Yep. Great. Amen to that.
yeah.
You left St. Luke and you were called to synod staff to work with
Yeah,
Bishop. Yeah. How long did you do that? And what was the goal of that?
to 2006. So yeah, I was in a kind of I don't know, a 6 year cycle there for a bit.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and that was, and I enjoyed that. It was a really good experience. I was my focus emphasis was on outreach and working with mission development and redeveloping congregations, partly because of my experience at St. Luke.
Yeah.
And as the bishop told me at that time, he said, "There's really nobody else who's had that experience in the synod." So I don't know. Okay.
You're the
Wasn't sure if
best
that
and the
was a
worst of what we got.
compliment or yeah, it's kind of a yeah. You're the only one who's done it, so we'll see if you want to be on board. Anyway, um, what I certainly enjoyed about that time was again the learning. I did a lot of work in conjunction with National Church when it came to new mission starts because finances are always tied into grants and things. So I got experience writing grants and kind of orchestrating new mission stuff um, and that was good. But uh, the administration was really heavy, and
Mhm.
I missed a lot of the people pieces to it.
Yeah.
It's my daughter's a nurse, and she spent a few years working on the floor. And what she enjoyed about that was the number of people she met, but she could never really form a relationship with them because they were in and out, you know. And now she works with patients. She's a nurse practitioner, so she has patients that she sees on a regular basis that she builds relationships with, and that's what she really really enjoys. And I would say that would be kind of like the difference between working in a synod office and working in a congregation. You don't get the opportunity to build those deep relationships over a period of time. This kind of, we always had a joke in the synod office. If somebody was calling us, it was probably because they were not having a good day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So um, there was a lot of triage on top of that. And in addition to the mission starts and things like that, I had a third of the congregations here in the Columbus area. So I would relate to the pastors and congregations, and I would do retreats and things like that, long range planning, things that's helpful to have somebody from the outside do
Hmm.
versus pastor himself or herself doing.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's kind of like that old adage, you know. I come home from school. That's happened a bunch of times. Mom, Dad, my teacher told me this is really important. Da, 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 da. And mom and dad will look at each other. We've been telling you that for
Yep.
since the day you were born.
Exactly.
Why does it sound like something new? You know,
Right.
so
Right.
so bringing somebody in from the outside sometimes helps that way.
Yep.
Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, and I just coming out of seminary or coming out of the synod office, I just felt called to get back into the parish,
Yeah. And
and
then you were in,
that's where
you went to Bexley and God called
yeah
you to
went to
preach there for
Bexley,
Christ.
and I grew up at Christ Church.
Did you?
I grew up. That's my home congregation. My wife's home
Wow.
congregation.
Hmm.
We were in youth group together. I was president. She was vice president.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
guys
we've
had
known each
presidents and vice
other's.
presidents in youth group?
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Dropping the ball here. Shoot.
No, you're smart. You're maintaining the power of decision making. Yeah. No, it was just figurehead, so everybody could feel like, they had voted on somebody or for somebody, whatever. But um,
Wow.
yeah, so I was there for 19 years, and that was another question, Lord, am I really, is this just me, my wants to do this, or is this your desire to have me there? And I think it came at a time for Christ Church when it was good to have, for many, a familiar face. Not always is that a good time for that,
Right. Right.
but it was. I think it was for both the congregation and myself. And
Wow.
yeah, yeah. But it
So
was
how long were you
it's
there? How
get
many
up
years?
and what's that?
You there for 18 years or 19? How many years?
19. Yeah, I
19 years.
actually, if I was still there, this would be July would be 20 years.
Oh, wow.
So and I've been out for 19, for 1 year, so retired for 1 year.
Wow.
And that was an issue of health. I
Mhm.
wouldn't have retired if it
Yeah.
wasn't three heart attacks and some, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Well,
couldn't
clearly,
keep up anymore.
yeah. I mean, clearly, from, preaching on Sunday, there's still, you have still a lot of gas in the tank, in that way. I mean, and wisdom to share and insights to share. And um,
Appreciate that.
I'm
Thank you.
just really grateful that we got to have a Sunday from that
Well, thank
perspective.
you. Well,
So,
yeah, and
yeah.
again, as I shared with you, whatever I can do to be a part of the community and help out along the way, just give me a holler.
Yeah. What was it
Yeah.
like to be having grown up in that church and then going back to be the pastor? What was that experience like, Tim?
Well, it's kind of wild, you see all your former Sunday school teachers
Yeah.
and out there, and that's Timmy,
Yeah.
and it was kind of funny in the sense that I could bring up stories from Christ Church that, well, I'll give you one example of how it kind of all happened. When I got there, they were going through kind of a re carpeting of the sanctuary. And if you've ever seen Christ Church, it's a long sanctuary from the chancel area back to the narthex. It's just the old cross shaped Gothic kind of, not Gothic, but European look to it, very traditional and lovely, beautiful sanctuary. And they were putting in new carpeting. Well, there's no break from the front. There's a pew after pew after pew after pew, front to back, which had made it over the years difficult for like communion, folks in wheelchairs. It was, just really tough. So, I'd been there maybe a month, and they say, don't do anything for your first year. And this is a big deal. But, time was, I said to council, I said, what if we take out a couple pews there about a third of the way back and have a cross section there in the pews themselves so people can come across? Communion will be easier. People in wheelchairs will have access to the front and all this kind of, well, we don't know. Well, I said, heck with that. And so I had the pews taken out.
Oh,
I didn't have any I didn't have any permission. I said, this might be all the chips pushed in the middle of the table right from the
yes.
get-go, right?
Yep.
And so, are you sure you want to do that, Pastor? This is a staff. Are you sure you want to do that? And I said, well, you know what? If they fire me, they fire me, and I go someplace else, whatever, So anyway, they took out the two pews and whatnot, and I had a little blurb in our newsletter that was a weekly newsletter at that point in time, and 19 years ago it was still in print and all that kind of stuff, and so I said there might be a little bit of a difference when you come into the sanctuary. We're getting in new carpet. I didn't straight out say their pews missing, but that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so people came in that Sunday and they're looking around and they go up and they see this gap in there. And they're all sitting down. And my mom and dad were still alive and they were members of the congregation. So I come out for the announcements and I said, surprise. And there was no laughter. There was just crickets. And I said, well, you probably noticed that there are a couple of pews missing here and there. And I said, here's why. And talked about flow for communion, flow for, people in wheelchairs. And we had a couple of pretty key people who were in wheelchairs at that point in time. It allows these folks to come up front for communion and not have to wait for me to come and give it to them. And it, it, I, it'll just be a better flow to it. And, we seat 500 in this place. We don't have 500 in any given worship. I don't think we need to worry about losing a few. I said, but the most important thing is, see those two pews that used to be there, that big gap over there? That's my family pew. I grew up in that pew that's no longer there. My mom and dad always sit in that pew. And you'll notice that this morning my mom is sitting in pew that's 3 pews further back. And she's not a happy camper. And sure enough, mom is like this, and then she's going like
Oh,
that to me. I said, if you are angry with me, you're going to have to take a number behind my mother. And if there's anything left of me, you can have it. And everybody broke out in laughter and said, oh, and mom's back there. And she had I didn't tell her either. And she's
oh my
back there going
gosh.
like this and going, what do you do, kids?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And, as the weeks went on, and to the very moment I left, people were saying, that was an awesome idea. We have benefited from that so much. Just that little space where families started sitting there with their young kids, and the kids would play in the gap
Oh,
there.
yeah.
So now all of a sudden the kids were starting to stay in worship and not go to the nursery.
Yeah.
Almost became, and that was not on my list of things that could happen. But the young
Wow.
families started sitting there in those gaps, but so anyway, that's
Man.
kind of an example of the benefits of being, a son of the congregation in there. Throughout the ministry, I took risks that I probably wouldn't have if I didn't have a history with people. But yeah,
Wow.
and part of
Yeah.
that link continued with my parents still being alive at that point in time. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow. Yeah. If
but
most youth pastors can't get away with doing something like that.
no, I would not recommend that to anybody. I would not recommend that to anybody.
First month in, we're taking pews out. Oh boy. Here we
Wow,
go.
Mike, I'm ashamed of you. You didn't take out any pews your first year. Shame on
No, I did not.
you. Where's the risk, Mike? Where's the risk?
Well, yeah, that's because Mike has a brain and I don't.
No, that's all. What a great, great, great story. Thank you for that. That's awesome. Well, hey, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Tim.
Oh, thank you,
Can
Mike.
This
Mike,
podcast.
can I ask
Thanks,
one
Greg.
quick
Of
question
course.
real quick before
Yeah.
I know you're wrapping it up. I mean, we got Tim on, and I guess my question for you is, as someone who was with St. Luke on in the early years,
Mhm.
what's just one hope that you have for St. Luke now in 2026 and our 35th anniversary and moving forward?
Well, I just pray that we as a congregation become more and more spirit filled
Mhm.
and spirit led, because it's a constant growth. You're never quote unquote there.
Mhm.
And I think what we know for sure is God has great plans for this community of faith. And he has great plans for you guys as leaders. And I think being open to the adventure that God has in store for us and looking at it as an adventure,
Mhm.
and you've used the word, Mike, the adventure. I've seen you imprint the adventure of our ministry here together at St. Luke. So I would say, the sky's the limit, and always look outside our walls, not
Mhm.
just inside our walls, which you guys are doing. Um, and I think, Greg, for you, I mean, I think youth ministry is more important now than ever. And I say that not so much because people say, well, kids have changed. Well, maybe not as much as we think. I think technology has changed. And I think I think that makes a big difference. All of a sudden, we've got social media and all these things that bombard the kids. How can we break through that and remind them that the only rock, when Jesus talks about being the vine, John chapter 15, he doesn't say, I am the vine, you're the branches. He says, I am
Mhm.
the true vine, which means there are a lot of vines out there that are trying to get their tentacles around us, but he is the one true vine that'll be there till the end
Mhm.
and has nothing but good for us and love for us and salvation for us. And I don't mean just salvation in an eternal sense. I mean salvation in a right now sense too. Um, yeah, so I think I've always, looking from afar, always really appreciated the ministry you guys have had with the kids. Because you look, especially post COVID, a lot of congregations, their youth programs are almost finished.
Yeah.
I mean, for all the different dynamics of COVID, the people, we struggled with that at Christ. I mean, struggled big time. We'd look at our roster and we'd say, well, we could have 30 or 40 kids in youth group. And the reality was if we got one or two, that was a good day.
Yeah.
If it just wasn't the youth leader showing up for a planned program and nobody else, you know, and, and struggling to find the answers to that. But you guys have just, I think, really come through that well, and I think just proclaiming Christ, proclaiming Jesus.
Yeah.
When folks think of St. Luke Lutheran Church, my prayer is that they think of us. When they think of us, they think of Jesus.
Mm. Exactly. Yeah.
Not even the programs.
Yeah.
Here I am finished. Not the programs. Just you want a good look at Jesus. You want to know how to follow Jesus. And I appreciate, Mike, what you put out for quiet times.
Mhm.
A guide to quiet. I think that is so important.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but when we think of St. Luke, we think of Jesus and serving Jesus. Not think of serving programs or issues, social issues or whatever, that, that's all those vines that try to entangle us and get us lost on the way.
Yep.
It's all about Jesus,
Yep.
period.
Yep.
Period. Well said. And I really, really appreciate those comments. That's so good. So good. Well, awesome. I think we've come to and wrap this up for our conversation for our podcast today. So grateful, Tim. And
Well, thanks, Mike.
yeah, we look forward to
Thanks
more
for having me
conversations
on.
going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll see you folks at the 8:30 service.
Yep.
I think we'll be there this week. Our oldest grandson's in this travel baseball thing, so I have to be careful what I commit to on the week. But we'll be there this week because I'm helping Pastor Chris out with the worship at Story
Oh,
Point.
yeah. Right. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
so
Awesome.
anyway,
All right, guys.
blessings to you both.
Thank you.
Prayers are with you.
Thanks for
Thank you so
listening, everybody.
much for having me.